everybody, it's Drybear. Grinding Gear Games has been busy. We've been getting a lot of individual hotfixes, but we got a big hotfix this morning that goes over a lot of the game issues that people are having now, so we're going to walk through what's changed. But let's go in the time machine and go over the last small hotfixes they did over the weekend that nerfed a couple of the effects in-game, because I think it's important for people to know exactly what's been changed over the weekend. Small little updates, but they might be affecting the builds you're working on. First one is they reduced the damage of Supercharged Slam by 60% overall. It was dealing far too much damage. There was one player in particular that was really showing off how strong this would be, and they ended up reducing that as well. They also reduced the damage of the Lightning Cascade in the Balak fight. They reduced the damage of Ball Lightning in the Uxmal fight, and they reduced the number of Lightning runes created from the Stormcaller runes ultimatum modifier. They also reduced the amount of energy that shield monsters get from the modifier on rare mobs extra shield energy. This or extra energy shield, it, in some cases, was incredibly high, especially on some mobs that would become untargetable for a period of time, start regenerating the energy shield, and then you would target them again, and they would just have an impossibly high amount, so that was reduced. They reduced the damage of magnetic salvos by approximately 40%. And a big one that was kind of sweeping through the mercenary community is they did make some adjustments to gas grenades explosion damage. Now, this was separate from the poison damage that would apply or any effects that come from the gas itself. It's if you ever do a detonator or have a sufficient ignite source to trigger the gas to explode, they pretty drastically lowered the explosion damage of the gas itself. Now, the other day yesterday, I put out a build for leveling for a grenade build. I don't think this makes the build unusable at all. In fact, most of the damage of my Grenadier leveling build for mercenary is from the explosive grenades, not from the gas grenade explosion. So I wouldn't say that that build is, I think it's still one of the top 3 leveling builds for a mercenary right now, and I don't think anyone should feel any like trepidation in using that build in general, but the gas grenade explosion has been brought down as well. Which brings us to today's massive patch, the thing that really brings everything to a T, and there's some really great stuff in here, so let's dive into exactly what's going on. First, campaign bosses killed after the first kill will now drop less currency items, replacing them with other items. A lot of people were finding bosses in the game that you could reset the instance of, kill again, and you would get a large amount of currency items and could farm very effectively, and they felt like it was a bit too much, so they ended up bringing that down. Additionally, this was a big one for people as well. They increased the drop rate of regal orbs. A lot of people were getting exalts occasionally and getting transmutation and augmentation, of course, but some of the orbs, like, you know, regal orbs, just weren't dropping enough, so they just globally increased the drop rate of regal orbs in general that you would just find out in the world. They also significantly increased the drop rate of gem cutters prisms. These you wouldn't really see until later on in the game. This would be kind of increasing the quality of gems, but they just weren't dropping enough, so gem cutters prisms are going to be dropping a lot more after the patch this morning. They also buffed the gem cutters prisms, increasing the amount of quality that they give, going up from 1% to 5%. So in general, they just weren't dropping enough, and when they did drop, they weren't giving enough. So gem cutters prisms are being brought up quite a bit, and honestly, it probably didn't affect too many players because there's only a subset of players that were getting these and using these regularly, but having this kind of adjusted based on the people that are at the cutting edge of the game right now, I think is still good. They also lowered the drop rate of chaos orbs and distributed like that total drop rate, so it still has a total amount of same drops. They distributed against other orbs that were a little less common, like regal orbs or exalted orbs. Personally, I think you probably wouldn't really get that many chaos orbs through your first playthrough of normal. You may get just 1 or 2, and honestly, through cruel as well, you probably will only get a couple. So lowering this, I think, is really just targeting the Atlas endgame activities in general, and obviously you can just trade for these if you really needed to, but I personally wasn't experiencing anything on my end that felt like chaos was dropping too much. But in this case, the chaos orbs are being dropped less, and the regal orbs and exalted orbs are going up, which I think is just going to be a benefit in general, because it seems like the currency that people are using most for trading right now is exalted orbs. The next one's a big one though, and one that I think is a good change, and that is they are lowering the drop rate of the Artificer's orbs and distributing it to lesser Jeweler's orbs. And I think this is worthwhile because honestly, as long as you're paying attention to loot dropping on the ground, and anytime loot has a socket on it or has quality, you should be taking that back to the salvage bench and salvaging it for shards for the Artificers and for the quality up as well. And I think that just means you get a pretty steady supply of Artificer's orbs as long as you're willing to just constantly pick up those socketed items. So making the whole Artificer orbs drop less, but also Also, increasing the amount of lesser jeweler's orbs, I think, is good, because a lot of times, especially for how much I make builds, I'm having to buy lesser jeweler orbs and greater jeweler orbs and all of those like directly for their actual price, because I just don't get enough through normal play. They also say so when you disenchant rare items with 6 modifiers, you will be provided with additional resources. Before, it wouldn't matter how many modifiers, you would get 1 regal shard. Now you get 2 if it has more modifiers, and the value displayed will show as 1 until a later patch, but you will actually get 2. Another major endgame change here, but they increased the values of all prefix modifiers that can roll on waystones for the Atlas. We've also adjusted the chances of getting the more commonly powerful modifiers, such as increases to rarity and pack size. So it was just a complaint from the endgame that you were just not getting enough value out of the waystone modifiers when you're putting them on your Atlas. In general, you were just getting the same prefixes over and over and over and over, and so you weren't getting the higher value ones or the rarer ones as often, so they redistributed that. They also made a pretty interesting change. Monster modifiers now grant higher amounts of item rarity and item quantity. This is most common on magic and rare enemies, so the normal there, but it also will affect unique enemies if applied through various endgame mechanics like the Deadly Evolution Keystone. Now, I'm not going to dive into the tier system that works on the drops in Path of Exile 2, how you get higher tier items, their chances of getting different modifiers, the rarity and quality drops and all of that, and how it gets affected, but just know that they are just making it on average, you're going to get a little better chances at getting higher quality and higher rarity, and the amount of items drop as well. There's another change on top of this as well that we'll talk about in just a second that will make the drops from specifically rare monsters probably the biggest impact, but also with, magic monsters like the champion packs as well. Another endgame change, but they're increasing the chance for rare monsters in maps to have 3 or 4 modifiers. And again, with the previous changes, having more modifiers on them means that higher quantity and higher quality will drop, but they're just trying to improve the end game. And honestly, that's kind of been the main focus of early access, is to get the end game systems proved out. So the people that are at end game right now, just after the first launch weekend, are experiencing some difficulties in getting the loot that they need. Now, they also changed rare monsters in map areas. There was another complaint that people were just running into they were just losing track of their rare monsters too often or skipping over them. And so now they've made the change for the end game map on the Atlas areas. The rare monsters are revealed on the minimap when there are 200 monsters remaining. So they raise the requirement for you to be able to see that on the map to know where they are from 50 to 200. So that is the hotfix that went live this morning, but they did do an official post with some dev comments on the changes that are coming up in a future hotfix, hopefully very soon, that are addressing some of the more core problems with the gameplay that people are having with the game overall. The first one is a big one. I think a lot of people have their own strong opinions on it, is the idea of being trapped inside enemies. This is a very deadly phenomenon in Path of Exile 2, where you get easily trapped in and boxed by mobs. You can't get out and you can't escape. So they made a small change that should have a positive impact on this experience for a lot of people, and they've mentioned that they realize that the trapping seems to be a bit too much, and they noticed that a lot of people are having trouble with it. So the one that they're trying to change in a future patch is they're making it so that when you dodge roll in Path of Exile 2, right now your hitbox goes down to a single unit, which means that unless there is more than a single unit worth of gap when you dodge roll, you won't be able to dodge roll through anything. So they lowered that amount, like your collision size when you dodge roll, from 1 unit to 0 units, which means that the enemies have to have essentially a perfect block with no gaps on it in order to completely block you and prevent you from dodge rolling out of the body block. I obviously have not been able to test this new change because it's not out yet, but it should be the case based on what they're saying here, that unless the enemies have a perfect block, in some cases you will now be able to dodge roll out. And also, if you dodge roll early enough before they close the gap, you should be able to easily keep that distance going, which I think is going to make it feel a little bit better for a lot of people. On top of that, they made it so they will make it so some smaller monsters can now be pushed while dodging. This includes monsters such as the Adorned Beetles and Keth. The next change is even bigger, is that the small monsters being pushed by this, so like the little rats, the little beetles, the larva in Act 1, some of the Act 3 little tiny dudes that run around, some of these really small monsters that are generally very fast as well, are really good at body blocking you. I'm sure that the beetles in Act 2 and the larva in Act 1 are some of the most common instances of being body blocked in the game right now. And so they've made it so some small monsters, if they're very tiny, will be pushed when you dodge roll. So not only is your dodge roll collision now down to 0 units, so as long as there's at least, like, as long as there's a gap of any size between monsters, you can dodge roll. And also now, when there's really small monsters that are body blocking you, you can shove them out of the way when you dodge roll. So those changes aren't live now, but I'll be sure to keep you posted for when those do go live. The next one is checkpoint changes. So they mentioned that a lot of people are having issues with the checkpoint not being available, or specifically around quest progress, where like you may have done the activity the quest is asking, but you didn't hit the checkpoint, so it didn't give you credit, so you have to backtrack a lot to go get those things. So they mentioned they're making some changes to that. They'll be deploying a new patch in an upcoming change to clicking on a checkpoint will allow you to teleport to other checkpoints in the area that you are explored on your minimap. This is not a small hotfix kind of thing, but this is pretty big. You'll be able to walk up to a checkpoint, click on it, and then teleport if you need to, and this helps a lot, especially with all of the large maps. Some maps in this game are incredibly big, and being able to teleport between them is going to be a big boom. They've also made it so checkpoints have been added to all entrances and exits of zones to allow for teleportation, which is perfect for exploration. It means that you can find a zone. Sometimes you're looking for a specific zone for a quest, and you find another one that you will need to go to eventually, so you see the exit for it, but you have to come back later. So now you'll be able to teleport to the checkpoints that are sitting at the zone, and it also means that when you transition between zones, you will activate the checkpoint and get the refill on flasks that you normally get for checkpoints, which makes traveling between it's going to make the progression of the campaign a lot smoother. Lastly, a checkpoint has been added to the midpoint of the first Dreadnought era. They just felt that it was a little bit too long. If you died on the Dreadnought, you would just be teleported to the beginning of the zone and have to run across it over and over again. So they just did that to alleviate that specific experience. Now, they also just acknowledge the fact that people are saying they're just not getting enough drops, and the drops they get aren't good enough. And they want to be very careful and upfront about this. They don't want to overdo it or overcorrect from that. Some of the changes that are already live in the game right now, with the currency items being dropped, more regal orbs, more items based on quantity, more items based on modifiers on rare and magic monsters, that sort of thing. Well, they're just going to kind of slowly work on that to see if they can get it to be improved, and also just watch the player base learn all of the things that are functioning in the game right now. Now, when it comes to rare monsters, they already mentioned that they're making some changes that are live now. They've already made these changes for the end game right now, but they recognize that when you're playing through the campaign on normal and cruel, you face a lot of unique mobs, a high frequency of boss monsters that will riddle the landscape and keep you interested. But in the end game, when you're doing the Atlas, it's going to be a lot less so and focus more on doing rare and difficult affixes. So they've already deployed rarity bonus per rare mod has been doubled, 10% quantity bonus per rare mod, and increase the chance of rare monsters inherently having more modifiers as you progress through the end game. And hopefully this just makes rare monsters in general a lot more threatening, but also a lot more rewarding. Now, we already talked about the map mod changes that they have deployed this morning in the hotfix to get that going, but they also plan to do more work. Things like quantity mods have had extra rarity added to them, and just more rarity mods being available for the end game map mod changes, which I think is going to be a nice change overall for the amount of drops that you get in endgame. Another big one that people have specifically around the campaign in general and focusing on unique monsters, so like true bosses that you clear out, as well as act bosses and map bosses, is people are just feeling like they just get unlucky. And there's definitely situations where you kill a boss and you end up getting almost entirely junk. It's mostly gold and like one currency item. And so they feel like they don't want that to be the case. They've deployed a change that no more than half of the unique monster drops can be gold. So it won't like randomly give you a big chunk of gold and you just will get no items from it. I've had that happen to me where I killed a unique monster and all of the drops were gold. The whole thing was gold. No more than 50% of the unique monster drops can be gold, and act bosses and map bosses will always drop at least one rare. So you won't get like a white item, a normal item, a magic item, and a bunch of gold. They will guaranteed drop no more than half of their drops will be gold, and they will be guaranteed to drop at least one rare or one yellow quality item when you kill a unique monster. A bit of a small one, but they fixed an issue with switching to move only command when you move to move only, like forcing your character to move. This was name locking, so it would result in your character attacking the wrong enemy or attacking in the wrong direction. So they've made it so move only no longer name locks. You don't have to worry about that. You can just use move only and freely. And then for endgame maps, we already talked about the change where that when there's 200 monsters monsters remaining instead of 50. You can see where the rare monsters are, so you can go kill them for loot. And they also have made it so that additional rare monsters have been added to maps to make sure that they reach a certain quota of having rare monsters on them. And that's what we got. There's a subset of changes that have already gone live either over the weekend or this morning, and there's more changes to come that they've planned based on the feedback they're getting. But let me know what you guys think about these changes, if you think that the GGG is responding properly to the feedback of early access, or if there's changes that you generally just don't like.
If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.